In round 9 of 11 at the US Chess Championships, we saw some incredible chess from Hans Niemann and Fabiano Caruana, despite the fact that it remains a tragically difficult time within the chess community and for the players at the tournament, all of whom knew Daniel Naroditsky personally. I want to have a look today at Niemann's win against the Wonder Liang and then move into Fabi's game against Sam Shankland. Truly incredible machine engine level precision. Let's start with Niemann. He kicks off with the King Prawn. We see a Roy Lopez on the board and the rock solid Berlin variation and queens off the board. We've not seen this one in a while. I'm normally seeing the white players keep the queens on the board, but we get this tried and tested theoretical line. Niemann now gains the space with the G-pawn here. We're going to rattle through the recap today, get to the best, most juicy action. Plus, I'm playing some chess myself later. Love connecting down the club in person. Really nice way to get out the house. Do get down to your local chess club. Give it some support. We now see pawn f3 here. So black's fighting back for the center. But let's be honest. You only play the Berlin defense if you like to suffer. Now you could play pawn b6 and then for c5. Get the bishop out somewhere. Then bring the rook to the d file. Or you could play for f6 ideas. I'm far from an expert, but these are some of the possibilities, right? But I wonder plays this little rook lift. Such a weird looking move, but we're going to see his idea. Love knight f4. Puts a question here. g6 preferred, but we get this. Takes, and now pawn c5, showing where the rook wants to head. We now see knight d5 though. And it shows the multi-purpose idea of Niemann's little jump. He threatens the fork here, so bishop d8. I mean, you have to have the patience of a saint to be playing this variation right. It's very passive, it's not fun, but it's also not easy to break down. Niemann completes the development. If f6, well, he's discouraging it, right? You open the eyes. So rook e6 blockades. Somehow it feels like the bishop should be there, but I'm not questioning a wonder. He knows his stuff. He does not trade the rooks. You do not want to activate one down here. So rook g8, passive but solid. Bishop g3. This one develops slightly, barely. Pawn c4 is explosive and supports the central knight, and we now get b6, b3, and this one kicks back the knight that goes on a new journey. And it really is tough playing the black position here, because even when you get the pressure on the pawn, it's not easy to actually win it. We're going to see themes of that. King d8 is now played. Rook h7, nice invasion, but you do need a follow-up. You're never just going to win with one weakness. There's the principle of two weaknesses. How can Niemann create it? Well, he gets an instant in with king c8. Now, what's the problem? It's knight e4 simply. And although you've blocked the rook's defense of the pawn, it can't be taken, or you get takes and rook takes and knight d6 check, and you pick up an exchange. In some lines, even without this tactical check, you can give the pawn and jump a knight to g5 as well. Depends on the nuances of the position. So you can't touch the pawn. We therefore get rook e7, and far and away the most powerful move is knight g5, because it prevents pawn f6 stuff. That is not working. You can start taking and then push f7 and you've got problems. But Niemann plays this and it allows this. f6 was also decent, and now you can't take on Croissant or you lose an undefended rook. Was defended until the knight went there. You know, micro changes in the position and the top GMs will pounce on it. So g5 was played. We now see rook f8, and you might be thinking f4, definitely playable, but this is actually more powerful, leaving the square free to be occupied by a piece. Bear that in mind. Bishop e8, rook h1, bishop g6, and now the knight bounces round. And now a wonder makes a critical mistake here. His best was rook f to e8. just pressure the pawn simply. It may even drop off the board. You know, here's one of the top lines where it is indeed won, but eventually the knight makes its way to f4, and despite being a pawn down, white remains a bit better. There are rook invasion ideas, there's a lot of problem pawns, and there's a problem minor piece here. So that could have happened, but didn't. We saw rook d8, and it's just the nail in the coffin, because Niemann can play pawn to e6, and it's a devastating blow, opening all the pieces, and then the knight to hop to f4. In the game we see this. The bishops leave the board. King takes, king g3 to support knight f4, bishop e8 on the board, and after knight f4 we see the final mistake, but the position's already lost, and it's this pawn b5. If a wonder had just tried to stay steady, hold solid, well, here's a quick sample line of how white can start invading. You've pretty much just got a free hand using some pins here, by the way. Just one quick sample. You ultimately land in an endgame where the white pawns are running on the king side, and this queen side counterplay just way too slow. So in the game, we saw this, but this loses immediately to takes and resigns. Because if you capture back, you walk into this this check here, winning a rook. You could even just take the pawn with a great game as well. But anyway, it's too much. So Niemann took down a wonder, bounces back from a double loss. Let's now jump to this game, because Sam Shankland, playing the tournament leader, Fabiano, going aggressive with the Siciliano here. We enter a Taimanov variation, loads of dark squared weaknesses for black, but dynamic play, counterplay. The bishop comes to d3 and the queen on e2. Slightly more unusual setup to this sort of stuff that we so often see, but this is all tried and tested theory, don't get me wrong. This is a more unusual move though, because e5 was main line at that moment. Now b4 is the main move in response, but Fabi doesn't want to walk into prep, so he just keeps developing the pieces. Always play king b1, always get your bits out. Pawn a3 now stops Fabi's b4 idea, but still doesn't play pawn e5, so it's shut down now by Fabiano. Bishop d2, castles, h4 shows aggressive intentions, but if you're getting attacked on the flank, where should you counterplay? In the center. Standard chess theory. We get takes. You could have glided on past. A very double-edged game. But Sam goes for this. A slightly safer way of playing, you could say. He holds a small advantage. His bishop's pointing at the king. So Fabi goes pawn f5 to try and shut out the influence of this, despite the compromised structure. And he just goes on a policy now of exchanging pieces to defend his king. Don't take the pawn, by the way. You run into this stuff, switching up and hitting here. The same was true on the last turn. You just didn't want to open the G file. So we see rook a8 played. Pawn g4 looks really scary, but Fabi's got it covered. Simply exchanging the attacking pieces. Now takes here. Pawn recaptures. Weak pawn, yes, but white's got weak pawns too. Rook e3 played. Bishop f7. Rook e5 pressures, but queen d6 is a nice rebuttal. If you capture, you get something like this, and then you drop a rook down here. This is of course completely winning. In fact, that's even checkmate. So let's run back. No takes of the pawn. The rook simply slides over. Now the pawn's on prise, but Fabi counters. This is played. It's a level position that we now enter. Even the queens leave the board. No one's better in this endgame, not really, but Sam plays this weird a4 move. He could have just held steady with rook c5. Goes for this, doubles the pawns, but that one's not dropping. Fabi covers both, then gets his h-pawn running here. c4 played, king h6, rook g1, bishop f7, it's standard stuff, but Sam just goes terribly wrong in a moment. Now don't defend the pawn. Fabi doesn't do it. Then you allow rook c8 invading. It's not ideal. So he correctly understands that he should give back that extra pawn. He could play bishop g6 here to try and swap those, but he pushes, takes. Either way of taking playable, rook takes selected, and we get the moment of truth. This is why Sam just doesn't break into that kind of higher 2700s club, right? He's dropped to 2650. It's these little lapses. Can he go deep into the game? He plays bishop b7. Should put it on d5 simply. The game remains level. Now, no criticism, by the way. I certainly can't do any better. But if you're going to stay at the high level that these guys are at, you got to shake it and bake it deep into the game. Check is played. The king goes to d2. What if it steps up the board? Well, then you run into new problems. Something to this effect. If you step here, by the way, well, you're running into this, picking up a bishop. This is the problem with putting it there. Loose pieces drop off, as they say. So we get this one played. Sorry, we didn't get king c3. If you go king d4, then you drop a rook. This is another problem. So king d2 was played, but new problems. Fabi weaves this check, my melody business. Drives the king over here, rook d3 check, and then hits this undefended bishop. And the problem is whether you take the pawn or bounce to d5, where you should have gone in the first place, is now the b pawn drops and you're threatening mate. I mean, it's check at the minute, so this covers the square. But now you can do this sort of thing and you can force through the mate. How do you stop rook g1 mate? I mean, you can attack this rook, but it checks with the support of the bishop. King goes somewhere and you land the final blow. These are the challenges. So this is why Sam just had to give up the bishop, but he's just straight a piece down now. Gets a pawn for it, a couple of connected runners, but the h pawn's too powerful. He resigns here. You know, say you spin round, try and head it off. Here's a quick sample line. The problem is not only is the black pawn running, but the king runs into these mating nets, or you lose huge material. You know, you could already win a rook here, but you can even do better. You can mate the king. One sample line. Let's run it back. Final position was here. Fabi wins. Hans wins. It's going to be some going now to catch Fabi. What an incredible run he's on. Hope you enjoyed this one and have a look at the video on screen if you want to see more incredible chess. Cheers.